So, you want to own a cargo ship, not a boat, a ship. Something with a name painted on the bow in letters a meter high and your company's funnel mark on the stack, appearing in the Lloyd's Register and in the arrival lists of ports you will never visit. You picture the phone call from the broker. The fixture confirmed, 180 meters of steel loading grain in Santos for discharge in Alexandria, moving without you, earning without you, while you're asleep. It is the last genuinely romantic form of capital. It is also a real business with real arithmetic. That picture is not entirely wrong, except before any of that, you should understand that you will not set your own price. Not once, not ever. Before we go further, we should be honest about who you is here. A 10-year-old Handysize bulk carrier, the smallest ocean-going class worth owning, was valued at about $20,250,000 in February 2026, according to Shipbrokers Exclusive. A 10-year-old Capesize was $52,500,000. Banks lend 50 to 60% against a hull. So the entry ticket is roughly $8 to $10 million of your own money for one ship, and one ship is the most dangerous number of ships to own. If that is not you and it is not me, then what follows is not a plan. It is a window into the business that moves about 90% of everything you have ever bought, and which has arranged itself so that you will never have to think about it. Here is the number most people do not want to hear. The More Maritime Index is built from audited financial statements of more than 1,500 vessels, which makes it about as close to ground truth as this industry produces. In its 2025 edition, using 2024 data, bulk carriers in fleets of 1 to 5 vessels earned a time charter equivalent of $12,625 per day and spent $6,450 per day operating. That is a ratio of 1.96. Your revenue covers your running costs slightly less than twice over, and out of that remaining gap comes your dry docking, your debt service, your depreciation, and eventually you, on a $20 million asset. The fantasy is so complete, and so old, and so tied up with the sea itself, that almost nobody making this investment asks what the audited numbers actually say. They ask what the market is doing. The market, by the way, is not a number anyone agrees on. The business research company puts global dry bulk shipping at $12 billion in 2025. Fortune Business Insights puts it at $144 billion. Global Market Insights says $168 billion. Those are three research firms describing the same industry with a 14-fold spread between them, which tells you to ignore all of them and look at physical reality instead. UNCTAD counted a world fleet of 112,500 vessels carrying 2.44 billion deadweight tons at the start of 2025. That is genuinely enormous and genuinely growing. It also tells you almost nothing about whether you personally will make money from it, because the thing you're buying is not exposure to trade. It is exposure to a rate. The concept you need is time charter equivalent, and it is the only number that matters. TCE is what a voyage actually earns per day of ship time once you strip out the fuel, the port dues, the canal tolls, and the ballast leg, and reduce the whole thing to a single figure you can compare against what the ship costs to run. Moore's audited range for bulk carriers in 2024 ran from $12,625 a day for the smallest owners to $16,758 for the largest. The danger threshold is not a number, it is a ratio. When TCE to operating expenses creeps below about 2, something is wrong, and when it approaches 1, you're paying to trade. Moore's own 5-year series shows that ratio at 1.46 in 2020, 3.61 in 2021, and 1.90 in 2024. Same ships, same crews. The entire difference is the market. So let us build the cost stack, starting with the item nobody budgets for correctly. The shocking variable is dry docking. Every 5 years, without exception, class requires a special survey, and for a bulk carrier that means the Enhanced Survey Program under SOLAS Chapter 11. Which means ultrasonic thickness measurement of the shell plating and close-up inspection of the cargo and ballast tanks. Seacoat put a modern bulk carrier's special survey dry docking at $1.5 to $4.5 million in 2026. And the spread is not a rounding error. It is the entire question of how much steel the surveyor finds wasted. Marine inspection reports that dockings typically run 15 to 25% over budget without disciplined project management, and that every day beyond the planned duration costs $20,000 to $50,000 in off-hire exposure, because a ship in a dock earns nothing and a charterer does not pay for a ship that is not there. Amortize $2 million over 5 years, and you have $400,000 a year of cost that never appears on a single voyage calculation. Then crew, which is the largest line in the daily cost and the strangest. Moore's audited figure for a Handysize to Supermax bulker in a small fleet is $3,225 per day, which is roughly half of all operating cost. Here is why it is that low. The International Labor Organization sets a global minimum monthly wage for an able seafarer, the only industry on Earth with such a thing. And from January 1st, 2026, it is $690 a month. Pay scale puts the average American able seaman at $49,579 a year. That is a ratio of about 6-to-1 MY arithmetic, and it is legal. And it is the reason UNCTAD found that 88% of Greek-owned tonnage flies a foreign flag, and that Liberia, Panama, and the Marshall Islands between them register roughly half of world carrying capacity. You are not registering in Monrovia for the weather. Then the rest. And Moore has audited numbers for all of it. Stores at $752 a day, repairs and maintenance at $983, insurance at $515, administration at $1,004, and then the new line, which is carbon. From January 1st, 2026, the EU emissions trading system covers 100% of in-scope shipping emissions, up from 70% in 2025 and 40% in 2024. And it now includes methane and nitrous oxide. At allowance prices around 75 to 80 euros a ton, one EU-linked voyage by a mid-size bulker carries a 5-figure carbon bill. Miss the surrender deadline and the fine is 100 euros a ton, and you still owe the allowances. Here is the margin problem. And it runs the opposite way to every other business in this series. A cafe has an 85% gross margin and a 10% net margin, and the story is about the distance between them. A ship has no gross margin story at all. On a time charter, you are paid a daily hire rate, and the charterer pays for the fuel. So your revenue is one number, and your cost is one number, and there is nothing in between to compress. $12,787 a day in, $6,422 a day out. That looks like a 50% margin, which would be extraordinary. A grocery chain runs on 25 to 30. But that 50% is not profit. It is the entire budget for a $400,000 annual drydock reserve, the interest and principal on $10 million of mortgage debt, and the depreciation of a steel object that is 1 year closer to a beach in Chattogram every year. Run those numbers on a 10-year-old Handysize bought at $20,250,000 with 50% debt at 6.5%. And the cash left over for the owner is about $124,730 MY arithmetic on $10 million of equity, 1.2%. Now the failure mode, and it is not the one you're picturing. Allianz Commercial Safety and Shipping Review 2026 reports 905 total losses over the past decade, and 43 in 2025 alone. But the trend is emphatically downward, with average annual losses falling 37% between the 2016 to 2020 period and the 2021 to 2025 period. Reported incidents fell 16% last year. Ships are not, on the whole, sinking. Machinery damage caused 1,505 incidents in 2025, more than half of the total. And Allianz notes that vessels over 20 years old are involved in more than half of all safety incidents worldwide. So the ship will probably not go down. It will simply break expensively somewhere far away, at an age you can predict. And here is the killer, which is that a ship has no zero. Every other business we have looked at in this series can stop. The cafe closes at 4 because the revenue window shut. The ice cream shop shutters in October. The restaurant that is failing can cut hours, cut staff, and cut the menu. A ship cannot. Your $6,422 a day is not a variable cost. It is a physical fact. The crew are 2,000 miles from land and cannot be sent home. Class certificates lapse whether you're trading or not. Insurance runs, hull maintenance runs, and the steel corrodes on a schedule that does not consult the freight market. In 2016, Splash reported Supermax bulkers running at about $6,000 a day against charter rates of about $2,500, which meant a loss of $3,500 a day while working and $6,000 a day while idle. That was the year the Baltic Dry Index touched 290, its all-time low. 8 years earlier, the same index had hit 11,793. That is a 40-fold range on the price of the only product you sell, set daily by other people. And you have no ability to hold inventory, no ability to differentiate, and no brand, and no customers of your own. And the escape hatch barely helps. Laying a bulker up, according to International Ship Care, takes a capsize from about $7,000 a day to $1,000 or $2,000. You can turn the ship off, and it still costs $1,000 a day to own. There is no closing the door. There's only slowing the bleed. So let us run the actual numbers on two realistic versions of your cargo ship. Option 1, the modest version. A 10-year-old Handysize bulker at $20 million, $250,000. $10 million of your own money, and $10 million of bank debt at 6.5% over 10 years. 355 revenue days at Moore's audited 12,000. $787 gives $4,539,385 of revenue. Take out $2,344,000 of operating cost, $400,000 of drydock reserve, and $1,670,000. $625 of debt service, and you're left with $124,730, ma'am, arithmetic. 1.2% on equity, and you are working for it. Now hold everything constant and move only the rate at $16,758 a day, which is what the best performing fleets actually earned in 2024. The same ship on the same debt with the same crew returns $1,534,435. Arithmetic, 15.2%. Nothing about the ship changed. Nothing about your skill changed. A number in London changed. Option 2, the premium version. A 5-year-old Handysize at $24,500,000. Better fuel numbers. Better CII rating. More charterers willing to take it. $12.25 million of debt. Moore's TCE for that fleet band is $13,406 a day, and OPEX is $6,660. Revenue of $4,759,130. Operating cost of $2,430,900. Drydock reserve of $400,000. Debt service of $2,021,250. That is minus $93,000. And $20 MAC arithmetic. The better ship loses money at 2024 rates because you paid $4 million more for it. And the freight market does not care what you paid. A genuinely attractive business on paper, and a brutally hard business in practice. The cargo ship business works. It has worked continuously for longer than any other business on this channel. Because human beings live in places that do not contain the things they need. And there has never been and will never be a cheaper way to move 100,000 tons of iron ore across an ocean than to float it. 90% of world trade still goes by sea. And there is no plausible technology that changes that. It does not work the way the fantasy version suggests, which is a name painted on a bow and a ship earning quietly while you sleep. It works when you own enough ships that one dry dock does not end you. It works when you buy at the bottom of a cycle you cannot time, and sell at the top of one you cannot predict. It works when your balance sheet can survive 2 consecutive bad years without a covenant breach. It works when you treat the vessel as a floating option on the freight market rather than a business. And it works when you understand that your only real skill is capital allocation. Because the sea does not care and the charterer does not care. And the Baltic Exchange does not care. It works when you accept that the asset has a floor made of scrap steel, priced by the ton on a beach in South Asia. And that the floor is the only price in this entire business that anybody will ever guarantee you. Not bad for an industry that moves almost everything you own, and has never once asked you to look at it.